and welcome to Wednesday Words for February 2nd. I decided to go ahead and do a little recording of what we talked about in our live room earlier tonight, just in case for those people that couldn't make it, or just so you can have the info. I'll also put my notes in the file section for those people that more like the written word when it comes to doing studies. And so we were discussing the idea of being a creative Christian. And so I've been reading this, I guess it's kind of a book, a magazine, a book, I don't know what you call it, but it's kind of like a book, but it's shaped like a magazine and it has really pretty pictures. I'll leave a link to it in the group for you guys. But it's by a company called Cageless Birds, and it's about, under their Cultivate the Process of Living from the Heart, and this is their volume 4 that is called Creativity Unlocked. And in the very first section, it's discussing identity as a creative and what that looks like, and how the idea of being creative has almost become synonymous with the idea of being an artist when they're not the same thing. And so I want to read a part from this, and it says, your calling as a human is to live a creative life, to marry creativity to the place you invest your time, whether it be as a mother, a pastor, a teacher, a lawyer, or a painter. Your right as a human is to tap into ingenuity, which is synonymous with creativity, and complete your calling and dreams with excellence. Excellence requires creativity. If your work is void of creativity, then you are one of two things: performing or terribly bored. And I love that idea of creativity isn't everything that we do, and it makes me really sad because I know, and you guys probably see this too, a lot of times you see in groups where someone's like, I don't know how to Bible journal because I'm not creative, or they post something they did that might have been inspired by someone, and they're like, well, I know it's not as good as so-and-so's, but I tried. And that always just breaks my heart, because they are literally just denying this gift that God has put within them, this desire that God has put within them. And I'm definitely of that mindset of that if you create, you're a creative person. It doesn't matter on quote-unquote what level you put yourself on. And I really feel like there's numerous scriptures to back that up. Today we're actually going to focus on 1 Timothy 4:14, and it says, do not neglect the spiritual gifts you received through the prophecy spoken over you when the elders of the church laid their hands on you. And if we look at the context of 1 Timothy, Paul is writing to Timothy, just laying out all those things about how to elect pastors and kind of more like church housekeeping-y kind of things. But then when he gets to chapter 4, Paul makes sure just to take a minute to remind Timothy that in the midst of all of this stuff, that he is creatively called through his spiritual gifts to be doing what he is doing. It's actually really funny because if you look at it at the beginning of chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 5, this idea of reminding Timothy of what he's called to do and what he is able and has been gifted to do is in between not listening to false teachers and advice to widows, elders, and slaves. So it's kind of like, this doesn't make sense in the flow, but I think the reason that Paul thought that was necessary is because Paul had been in Timothy's shoes, and Paul understood how easy it can be when you're in one of those positions to fall in what we nowadays call the imposter syndrome. So if you're not familiar with the idea of the imposter syndrome is this inner belief that you are inadequate and that you are mediocre, despite all this evidence that shows that you are skilled, that you are accomplished, and that you are talented. It's the belief that you're putting something out there that other people are raving about, but they shouldn't be because it's not that good, you're not that good, all that kind of thing. And it's kind of crazy because if you look at studies that have studied the idea of the imposter syndrome, which I read a really great article about it, which I'll link down below as well, it says that at 80% of adults at some point in their life have felt like they have suffered from and the imposter syndrome. And reading through this article, I love this idea that it comes up with. It says the problem with the imposter syndrome is that it has less to do with how we view ourselves and has more to do with how we view others. I'm going to say that again because I think that will preach. Imposter syndrome has less to do with how we view ourselves and more to do with how we view others. So that is saying that we fall into the trap of the imposter syndrome of believing that we aren't good enough, we aren't called, we aren't gifted because we have changed our focus from what it should be onto other people. And I think that is an amazing thought and something that we really need to take captive of and think about in our own lives sometimes of what is our focus. And if our focus is on other people, our focus is not going to be on our passion. Our focus is not going to be on our creativity. Our focus is going to be on other people, and we're going to start losing that flame. We're going to start losing that passion that is within us. Psalm 107:9 says, "He satisfies the one who thirsts, filling the hungry with what is good." And if you read through that sentence, it says, if we're thirsting for creativity and we're thirsting for whatever that is, God is going to fill that hunger and fill that thirst with good things. And it's going to be our version of good. It's not going to be somebody else's version of good. And Timothy knew what his calling was, and Paul knew that he needed to take that little section in chapter 4 and just remind Timothy that he is in control of his own spiritual choices. So Timothy could have easily been swayed and looking at other people and being like, well, I'm not as good as Paul. I'm not as good as this. But Paul wanted to make sure that Timothy knew that where his focus needed to be. And what I love is that if you look at that part in the chapter, it doesn't talk about what Timothy has done. It doesn't say, remember all these things you did that were super great. Keep doing that. Good job. If you look at it, it tells Timothy what he needs to continue to do. Do you see the difference? It's not about what he did. It's about what he needs to continue to do. And he uses words that are forward thinking. It's words like train, training, explain, work hard, teach, learn, focus, do not neglect. So if we think about that, and Paul is telling Timothy that you haven't arrived, you're going to continue to work. Yes, you are gifted, but your focus needs to be on this, and you need to be continually learning, continually not neglecting your gifts so that they can grow. And I think that's something that we all as creatives are called to do, to be a work in progress, and to be okay with that, to learn that we're not imposters just because we're trying. We're not pretending to be someone else just because we copy somebody else's thing. We are continual learners. We are thirsting for creativity and for that passion within us to be filled. And like Psalm 107:9 says, if we thirst for that creativity, we thirst for that passion, he's going to fill that with good things. And your good might look different than somebody else's good, but they're still good. And so I just love this idea that if we continue to focus on our own creativity and focus on our own passion for Bible journaling or whatever your version of creativity is, and not get stuck in that where we've put creativity and God's creativity in a box and said, well, I'm not creative unless I do X, Y, Z. If we just have that freedom of knowing and saying that creativity is for all, and whatever that creativity looks like for me, if I'm thirsting after that and focusing on why I'm doing it and not focusing on other people, but I'm focusing on my own relationship with God and my own thirst and my own passion, that God's going to fill that with good things. And that that it's okay to be a work in progress. It's okay to grow our creativity. It's gonna be, 5 years from now, you're gonna look back at what you Bible journals 5 years ago and maybe look at something and go, dude, I would never do that now. But that's okay. That's the place you were in at the time, and it was a beautiful place. We need to understand that we're all going to be learning along the way. And what I love is the idea of something else it talks about in this book is the idea of altars, that we have moments in our lives where we build altars for moments of memory and moments of purification and moments of triumph. And I think each of these little entries into our Bible are little altars. And what we bring to that altar is beautiful. Even if you look at back in the time of when altars were actually, animals were slaughtered, not everyone brought the same thing, but it was still beautiful to God. It was still accepted by God because everyone brought their best. And if we can get to the point as creative Christians where we look at what we do and go, God, I gave you my best. I laid it on the altar of my Bible, of my art journal, of whatever that might be. This is my best, and I'm laying it down before you. And it's good. It's good, God, because it's my best. And I'm not going to focus on what other people are doing and how it compares to what I'm doing. I'm just giving you my best. And I think the best is, giving your best is always good enough. So let's continue in that. And thank you guys so much for taking time to watch this for Wednesday Words. And I will see you guys next time. Have an awesome night, guys.